TIL that nearly 16,000 COVID cases went unreported in England because Public Health England used a legacy XLS spreadsheet file that can only handle up to 65,536 rows to record cases instead of a proper database. The UK Department of Health's advanced system for registering medical devices after Brexit, specifically the deadline to register devices in the UK in 2022, was an Excel sheet. The difference between that and COVID is that they had 6 years to develop something and chose not to. Then again, this is the same agency that started moving towards a digital patient record system and gave up after spending 10 years spuffing £10 billion up the wall, and also spent another £37 billion on track and trace during COVID. They are at our best. The UK Department of Health's advanced system for registering medical devices after Brexit, specifically the deadline to register devices in the UK in 2022, was an Excel sheet. The difference between that and COVID is that they had 6 years to develop something and chose not to. Then again, this is the same agency that started moving towards a digital patient record system and gave up after spending 10 years spuffing £10 billion up the wall, and also spent another £37 billion on track and trace during COVID. They are at our best. At least they used Excel. I used to work for the French Interior Ministry, and God did I witness some horrors. Like some databases containing several thousand entries made with Word. Just word boards, not even rotated to accommodate all columns, just a notch above a handwritten book in terms of usefulness and inability to share what they contained. Some of these took minutes to open, edit, and were an absolute nightmare. Never underestimate the inefficacy and sheer incompetence of a public ministry. Having worked at several extremely large companies, let me say the amount of stuff living in Excel is terrifying. If Excel someone stopped existing tomorrow, the global economy would collapse within 48 hours. And no, it's not even huge things that should really be in a database, though there are plenty of those. There is just so much stuff stored in Excel files because it's not worth putting it somewhere else. There are billion-dollar companies that depend on Excel as their database for incredibly important things. Even when many companies get a proper database, it can take a decade or two for all important data to actually be stored in it. It's wild. It's a testament to how irresponsible companies are, even to their detriment. If there's no regulation threatening significant legal penalties, I don't really have an issue with them using Excel, because it is a very versatile tool that can conjure a fuck ton of charts, can manipulate all kinds of data, a lot of people use it for budgeting, and so much more. But the incompetence to use legacy over latest is insane to me. I feel like you gotta go out of your way to use legacy over latest. As someone that was part of a tech transformation in one of the main departments of the gov putting out a lot of the cool stuff, you wouldn't believe how much crap we couldn't transform and had to virtualize into their new tech, because they couldn't move away from the 25-year-old shit software they were using. I believe part of it is because UK government always wants to use open source formats, of which the old Excel format is, but the newer one, which has more rows, isn't. Not saying that excuses the baffling nature of using Excel for it, or for not wanting to pay money for it, but anyway. It's all odd. Another fun example of problems due to people using Excel as a database are the genes that had to be renamed to keep Excel from interpreting them as dates. Using Excel for complex tasks that it's absolutely unsuited for is the dirty secret of every large organization. Literally every employer I've had, from the Marines to several retailers to 2 large banks, have used it, and used it dangerously. As someone who works with databases and data migrations, sometimes from Excel to a proper DB setup, this is not surprising in the slightest. You wouldn't believe the amount of stuff kept in Excel that has no business to be. But remember, according to the masks or communist tyranny bunch, we were overcounting cases. This shit is why Public Health England got renamed to the UKSA, which, big surprise, didn't fix the underlying problems. I've made a full-time career of trying to help trillion-dollar companies move from Excel spreadsheets to an actual database. It's a battle. The day workers dare me to pry their spreadsheets from their cold dead hands. That's nothing. Ron DeSantis forced coroners all over Florida to classify at least 50,000 COVID deaths as pneumonia so his insane lies about the vaccines and masks were upheld. The guy is just shit. That's just like part of the plot on the thick of it. Incredible scene with Peter Capaldi. The government just needs a Malcolm Tucker in their circle. That's what happens when you refuse to give DBAs proper salaries. Stop trying to undercut the people who became what you need to filter data for you, and actually pay them a fair wage. My understanding is it was actually Deloitte, the management consulting firm, that was hired by Public Health England and that used a XLS file. Consultants do everything in Excel. That's a drop in the bucket compared to the over-reporting of COVID deaths. If you were positive for COVID, it was reported as a COVID death even if you got it struck. Crazy, but true. They were that stupidly inept. My other half works for the NHS and the horror stories of daily corporate foolishness he tells me about are something else. What is this bait-ass title? Excel why using Microsoft's tool caused COVID-19 results to be lost. No, fucking morons caused lost data, not Microsoft. Numbers didn't matter after all. And if you look further you'll find the number of deaths attributed to COVID were drastically overreported. Damn, I remember writing Excel-based software that I eventually had to port to an external app because of this exact limit like 1999. And since each test result created several rows of data, in practice it meant that each template was limited to about 1,400 cases. Wow, this shit happens more than people realize because there's enough CS pros out there that don't pay attention to data type limits. Don't get me started on companies still using antiquated Excel worksheets instead of programming it into something like Python. Utter clowns from tech sitting and viewing Excel as some outmoded technology. It runs supply chains and will continue to do so. Many false positives were reported because politicians needed to juke the numbers to justify their draconian interventions. Well, they only spent £12 billion on test and trace. Can't expect them to do things properly with that kind of pocket change. Wait, what? In my country there was a leaked XLS files with the personal data of 700k citizens, so way more than 65,536. Mexico's government unreported more than 300,000 COVID-related deaths, just because that's what they wanted to do. Is their government run by interns? Surely they've dealt with larger numbers of people for other things, right? The state using Excel as a database, lol. These are the exact people who shouldn't be in charge of healthcare. Goddamn, I would not want to accidentally open that XLS file on anything with less than 1 terabyte of RAM. Lamau. Don't blame Excel. I have an Excel file with 100,000 rows that opens just fine on a PC with 8 gigabytes RAM. Goddamn, get LibreOffice or something. Hell, Google Sheets even. It's got a nice UI. Fucking hell. As someone who used to work in a data software company, we had a saying Excel is not a database. Article says 16,000 cases were missed and then caught 2 days later and went on to be reported. Coming from the BBC who got in trouble for COVID info. I believe this story for sure. Maybe they needed another billion to get things right. 40 billion clearly wasn't enough. What an excuse. No one dared to make a new sheet or an Excel file? Or learn MS Access. At least Excel supports 64-bit numbers. Access didn't support that until Office 365. Excel can be a perfectly proper DB. It has limitations. There are workarounds. Is this that database that cost us billions as part of test and trace? I don't want to hear one more crack about America from Doc Martin. If they went unreported, how did they figure out how many there were? I remember when that was a limit. Had to be pre-2008 or earlier. Can one of you nerds explain it to us jocks what this means? So many missed possibilities to report broken toes as COVID. Have they heard of SQL? Heck, even MS Access would be better. So not even the most recent format of Excel sheets. Yikes. So they can't save two files, COVID-1 and COVID-2? LOL. Apparently they had never heard of spreadsheet tabs. This is why we use CSV files for large data sources.